I thought I had locked the door. It was just another quiet afternoon. I was alone in my bedroom, the laptop resting on my thighs, a few personal items nearby. My skin brushed softly against the cool sheets, and my hand. Well, it hadn't moved from where I'd left it. Then the doorknob turned. He walked in, no knock, no sound. My body froze. The screen was still glowing, the sound still playing, and his eyes stopped right where I hadn't yet covered. If you've ever been caught in a moment no one was supposed to see, and their eyes stayed with you long after, subscribe and keep listening. Because what happened after wasn't just an accident. It started as just another lonely stretch of days. My husband, Richard, was away on yet another business trip, his third this month. At this point, the sound of a rolling suitcase was more familiar than his voice at dinner. I used to dread these long absences, but recently, solitude had started to feel safe, predictable, even indulgent, like slipping into a soft, oversized sweater you wouldn't dare wear in front of anyone else. This house, nestled between tall trees and forgotten roads in a quiet part of Vermont, had become a museum of routine. Every corner whispered memories, but none of them made me feel alive anymore, except one presence that had started to disturb that stillness. Logan, Richard's son from his first marriage, 23, recently moved back home after college to figure things out. Tall, quiet, always polite, but with eyes that watch too carefully and footsteps that always seemed to pass too close to my door. I told myself it was nothing, just imagination, hormones, boredom. But there was a moment last week, a small, careless thing, when I bent over to pick something up and looked back to see him standing there. He didn't say anything, just looked at me a second too long, and I didn't move. That's when I knew the silence in this house wasn't as empty as I thought. That afternoon, I gave in to something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Desire not for anyone, not for anything in particular, just for myself. Richard was away. Logan had said he was going out with friends and wouldn't be back until late. The house was quiet, still mine. And in that rare silence, I let myself feel again. I lit a candle. Something soft, vanilla scented, slipped into my favorite robe, thin as breath, turned off the overhead lights. The sheets were freshly washed. The windows cracked open just enough to let in the warm Vermont air. My laptop rested on the bed. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. One video, then another. My hand moved slowly, deliberately, like I needed to remind myself I still existed beneath the skin. I didn't hear the footsteps. I didn't hear the doorknob, but I heard the sound of breath catching. I looked up. Logan was standing in the doorway, wide-eyed, frozen. I don't know how long we stared at each other. A second, 10. Time folded in on itself. His eyes flicked to the screen, then to my robe, and then to my hand. Still caught between motion and memory, I yanked the sheet up. Too late. The video still played behind me. My chest rose and fell like I'd been running. He didn't speak, just watched. Not with judgment, not even with confusion, but with something far more dangerous, curiosity. And in that split second, I felt something else, shame. Yes, but also heat. Not from the screen, not from the candle, but from the way he looked at me like I was something he hadn't been allowed to want. Until now. Then slowly, he stepped back. The door clicked shut, and I sat there, heart pounding in my throat, realizing that something had shifted, not just in the room, but deep inside me. I felt exposed, not just physically, but in a way that left me raw, vulnerable, like he hadn't just seen my body, but every ache I'd been hiding beneath it. I buried my face in my hands, heat rushing to my cheeks. God, what had I just let him see? Somewhere on the other side of that door, I imagined Logan leaning against the hallway wall, trying to steady his breath, equally unsure whether to feel ashamed or curious. And that's when I knew we had both crossed something, even if neither of us had moved a single step. The day after it happened, the house felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. Like something had taken root in the walls overnight. Something neither of us could name, but both of us felt I didn't see Logan that morning. I waited longer than I should have in the kitchen, stirring a coffee that had long gone cold. No footsteps, no voice, no eye contact. When I finally heard the creak of his bedroom door upstairs, I walked away without thinking, as if avoidance could somehow erase what had already been seen. The day moved slowly. I couldn't focus on anything. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow looked like him. I didn't know how I would face him again, or how he would look at me. Would he pretend it never happened? Would he say something? Or worse, would he say nothing at all? By late afternoon, I walked past the hallway and found the door to his room half open. He was inside, earbuds in back, turned to the door. I didn't knock, I didn't go in. But for a second too long, I stood there watching the way his shoulders tensed when he sensed I was near. He didn't turn around, and I didn't call his name. That night, we passed each other in the hallway. Briefly. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. I wanted to say something, anything. But the words tangled in my throat. And yet, there was something in his gaze, not anger, not embarrassment, but restraint, like holding back something that had already taken shape. And deep down, I realized I was doing the same. A single touch in the dark, and suddenly distance isn't so easy to keep. Stay with the story, and don't forget to subscribe for what's coming next. The tension is just beginning. That evening, just after sunset, I stepped into the shower, hoping to rinse away the weight of the day. The warm water slid down my skin, soothing in the way only silence and solitude can be. I closed my eyes, let the steam blur out everything, including the awkward glances and heavy silences. But then the lights flickered, and without warning, everything went black. I froze. The water still poured, but the bathroom was swallowed in darkness. I reached for the towel, fumbling in the dark, wrapping it tight around myself like a shield. Elena. It was his voice, muffled, cautious, from just outside the door. "You okay?" "Yeah," I called back. Breath, catching slightly. "I think the power's out. I'll look for a flashlight," he said. A few seconds later, I stepped into the hallway. Barefoot, robe, damp skin, still warm from the water. I followed his voice toward the kitchen. The only light came from a distant street lamp, casting soft shadows through the window. We both moved slowly, blindly, until I turned a corner and bumped straight into him. Chest to chest, I gasped. His hands reached out instantly to steady me. Not on my shoulders, but at my waist. His fingers didn't flinch. Neither did mine. For a moment, we didn't move. My face tilted up toward his breathless. His eyes adjusted to the dark, catching mine. then drifting lower toward my lips. The heat from the shower hadn't left me. But this was something else. I didn't see you, I whispered. I know, he murmured back. His voice was low, rougher than usual. I didn't move. The space between us was gone. What remained was a quiet thrum of energy, dangerous, magnetic, inevitable. But just as the pull tightened, the lights blinked back on. We jerked apart, like the moment had burned us. Logan turned toward the breaker box, pretending to inspect it. I stood, frozen towel, clutched tighter, pulse racing. Nothing had happened, but everything had. The next evening, I found Logan in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring at nothing. He looked up when I walked in, not startled, not nervous, just waiting. Marissa, he said, voice low, steady. We need to talk. I paused by the doorway, fingers brushing the frame. I know. I sat across from him, but it felt like we were in the same breath, the space between us heavy with all the things we hadn't dared say. I'm sorry, he began. For the other night. For yesterday. I didn't mean to walk in on you. I should have turned around. I shook my head. You didn't do anything wrong. There was a long silence. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. He added, you didn't. My voice was quieter than I expected. What happened wasn't just your fault. I didn't stop it either. He exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Me neither. I admitted, eyes locked on the carpet. I tried to pretend it didn't matter, but it did. He looked at me, really looked, not with lust, but with something deeper. Why does this feel so right and so wrong at the same time? I wish I knew, I whispered, but I'm tired of feeling alone. That was the truth, the aching center of all of it. Logan leaned forward slowly, carefully. His hand reached across the table, resting lightly on mine. I didn't move away. Instead, I turned my palm up and held his. When our eyes met again, nothing else existed. He stood, stepped around the table, and sat beside me close enough for me to feel the warmth from his skin. I've wanted to kiss you for a long time, he said quietly. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I tilted my head just slightly, and in the quiet space between two heartbeats, our lips met. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was full of longing, of questions, of every unspoken thing we'd been carrying in silence. And when we pulled back breathless, I saw it in his eyes. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. A kiss could have been the end, but instead it opened a door neither of us knew how to close. Keep listening and make sure to subscribe now. What comes next will blur every line they thought they couldn't cross. The kiss deepened. What began as a tentative brush of lips became a pull, a need, something neither of us could control anymore. My hand slid up the back of his neck, fingers curling into his hair. He breathed into me like he hadn't taken a breath in years. Then, without a word, he reached for the tie of my robe. I didn't stop him. The silk slid off my shoulders, cool air brushing skin that hadn't been seen touched or wanted in far too long. His eyes moved over me, not fast, not greedy, but reverent, like I was something to remember. He leaned in again, slower this time. His lips didn't go to mine, but to my collarbone, then lower. I gasped, not in shock, but in release, like something that had been locked inside me was finally allowed to escape. My back met the couch cushions. He followed, bracing himself with hands on either side of me, not touching, yet just hovering, waiting for a sign. And I gave it. I pulled him down to me. Every kiss was deeper, every breath shorter. His hands found the curve of my waist, then the back of my thigh, fingers firm, sure, but never rough. There was no more hesitation, no more pretending. It wasn't fast, but it was urgent, like we were both trying to memorize the shape of something forbidden, knowing it couldn't last, but needing it anyway. When our bodies pressed together fully, the heat between us was overwhelming. Every inch of skin, meeting another for the first time, a first that felt like a lifetime overdue. I whispered his name, once, twice. He responded not with words, but with motion, the kind that said, "I see you, I want you, I'm here." By the time we fell silent again, the air was thick, my skin was flushed, my robe was on the floor, and Logan was still looking at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. We didn't say anything, because nothing we said could have made it more real than what had just happened. It happened slowly, like a tide pulling us in, wave by wave, until we were both fully under. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just skin on skin, heartbeats tangled together, and a silence that held more meaning than any words could. It wasn't just about desire. It was about being seen, about being touched, like I mattered, like I was still here, still a woman. When it was over, I didn't move. Neither did he. Our bodies stayed close, breaths still uneven. His hand rested lightly on my waist, thumb tracing slow, absent circles, like he didn't want to let the moment slip away too quickly. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. The morning after sunlight slipped quietly into the living room and settled on the bare skin of my shoulder. I was still lying on the couch. So was he. We hadn't moved much during the night. Somewhere around dawn, I'd pulled a blanket over us, not to hide, just to soften the weight of what had already happened. Logan was still asleep beside me, his face turned toward mine, peaceful in a way I'd never seen. One of his hands had rested gently over my hip, for most of the night only slipping away as he stirred. Moments ago, I sat up slowly. The blanket clutched to my chest and listened to the silence. Not the hollow kind I'd known for years. This silence was full heavy with truth. For the next few days, it was as if time bent itself to us. Richard was still away. The house for once felt warm. We didn't talk about what we'd done, but we spoke with our eyes, with fingers brushing as we passed in the hallway, with coffee cups prepared before either of us asked, with quiet, lingering looks across the room that felt more intimate than words. At night we slept in different rooms, doors closed, but the space between us still pulsed. He'd text me, "You still awake?" And I'd answer, even if I wasn't, "Can't sleep." His reply would come quickly, "Thinking about you." I never replied to that one, but he didn't need me to. He knew. I left my door unlocked, but reality has a way of creeping back in. On Tuesday evening, Logan returned with his jaw tight and eyes distant. He avoided my gaze, moved past me without a word, and disappeared upstairs. Later, I sat alone in the dim kitchen when my phone lit up. It was from him. He'd seen Carly, and she had seen something in him. He said she didn't ask questions yet, but there was suspicion in her eyes and tension in her voice. She knows something's different, he wrote. And that was all it took to twist a knot in my stomach. Not guilt, not even fear of exposure, but the sinking realization that someone else, someone who had nothing to do with what we'd found, might be the one to take it all away. The doorbell rang just after dinner. Richard stood from the couch with a grunt and walked to answer it. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsing a plate, half listening. Then I heard her voice. "Hi, Richard." Sweet, polite, dripping with control. I froze. "Carly." I stepped into the hallway, water still on my hands, and saw her standing there in jeans. Too tight. Hair? Too perfect. Smile? Too sharp. Her eyes found me instantly, not by accident, like a wolf who already knew where the weakest part of the fence was. "Elena," she said, with a little wave. "We haven't officially met, have we?" I nodded slow. "No, I don't think we have." Richard, oblivious, smiled politely. "Carly used to date Logan. They were together for a while back in college." "Used to," Carly said quickly. "That's important." She smiled wider, showing teeth. Her eyes didn't leave mine. The silence that followed was short but heavy. "I just wanted to stop by." She continued. "Say hi, catch up with Logan." She looked over Richard's shoulder, scanning behind him like she was already taking mental photos of the space. Richard turned. "Logan's upstairs, I think." "Oh, good," Carly said sweetly. "I'll just say a quick hello." She stepped inside, and then as she walked past me, she leaned in barely enough to be heard and whispered, "Nice robe. It's his favorite color, right?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to warn me. Richard still had no idea. He was already walking back to the living room. Distracted, Carly turned to me with that same too-perfect smile and added louder this time. "Looks like we have a lot to talk about." Her tone was casual, but her eyes burned. After Carly left the house, didn't feel the same. Not immediately. But little shifts began to ripple through everything. Richard, once aloof and distracted, suddenly became attentive. Too attentive. The next morning, he followed me into the kitchen instead of checking emails like usual. "You sleep okay?" he asked, eyes lingering on me, a beat too long. I nodded. "Fine." "You," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I did. Though I woke up a couple times. Thought I heard something. A pause. Just long enough to feel like a test. Later, while I folded laundry on the couch, he sat nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone. But every time I looked up, he was watching me. By evening, it became hard to breathe. Logan barely came downstairs. When he did, the tension between him and Richard was thick enough to cut with a knife. At dinner, Richard looked between the two of us too casually. "So what have you two been up to while I was gone?" he asked. With a small grin, I dropped my fork. Logan coughed. "Nothing much," I said quickly. "Just the usual." Richard's grin didn't fade, but something behind it sharpened. "That's good," he said, "because you know how I hate surprises." He reached for his glass of wine, and I suddenly felt cold. That night I messaged Logan from the bathroom with shaky fingers. He knows something's off. He keeps watching me, asking questions. I'm scared. There was no reply for several minutes. Then finally, stay calm. I'll handle it. But I knew, deep down, the walls were closing in. And it wasn't a matter of if. It was when the doorbell rang again. This time, I knew exactly who it would be. I didn't move, but Richard did. I'll get it. From the kitchen, I heard the familiar voice. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Carly. My stomach dropped. She entered like she owned the place. One hand on her hip, the other holding her phone like a loaded weapon. Richard stepped aside, puzzled. Did you forget something yesterday? Oh no. Carly said, her voice sweet as ever. I remembered everything. Then her eyes locked on me, and her smile hardened. I think it's time we all had a little chat. Logan came down the stairs, right then. He froze the second he saw Carly standing in the living room. Oh, good. You're here, she said to him. Perfect timing. She pulled out her phone, opened a folder, and tapped. A video started playing. I didn't see the screen, but I heard it. A gasp. A whisper. My voice. I felt the blood drain from my face. Carly looked at Richard. Do you recognize the voice in that video? He blinked, confused. What is this? She walked closer, held the phone out. That's your wife, she said, and your son. Silence. The air went still. Richard's face didn't change at first. Then he looked at Logan, then at me. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He just blinked, once, twice. Then he quietly turned, walked over to the bar cart, and poured himself a drink. Carly stepped back, satisfied. I told you I'd say something, she whispered as she walked past me, and then she was gone. I stood, frozen, breath caught in my throat. Logan took a step toward Richard. Dad. Richard raised a hand, not in anger, just to stop the sound. I don't want to hear it, he said calmly. Too calmly. He looked at me one last time, but the look was empty now. Then he walked out the front door, and all I could do was stand there. Some mistakes don't come with slammed doors. They end in silence, the kind that lingers after everyone's walked away. That night, after Richard left, I sat alone in the quiet of the living room. The same place where desire once felt like freedom, now felt like exile. I thought passion would fill the emptiness, but all it did was change the shape of the silence. Sometimes, what we mistake for love is really just the ache of being forgotten. And sometimes, the people who leave us with the deepest wounds are the ones we reached for when we felt invisible. I don't know what happens next, but I do know this. No matter how far we stray, the hardest journey is always the one back to ourselves. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever stood at a crossroads between longing and loyalty, don't leave just yet. Subscribe now, because the next story might just be the one that helps you see yourself more clearly than ever.